Now we are recording. Thank you for joining the Honest Hour. We didn't hit the record button. Now we did. All right. We're joined by Tyson Cleveland Langley, realtor who covers the Fraser Valley. Norm Hiller, agent in Vancouver East, covers Vancouver and Burnaby. EJ Bukayong, based in Richmond, covers Richmond, Vancouver, and other parts. And I'm Christian B here in Burnaby and cover Burnaby, Vancouver, and so on. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today. Valentine's Day is coming up. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of real estate, let's talk about maybe a short Valentine's plan. So you got anything special planned for the lady of your life?
Yeah, the OAKWYN, or like our brokerage Christmas party was Mr. Freeze themed, so I dressed up as Mr. Freeze, and I won a $250 gift card to Gotham Steakhouse. So I'm going to take we're going to have a date. We have reservations already at Gotham Steakhouse, so that $250 should get us one steak, and we'll make share it or something. But yeah, that's our plan.
Okay.
Tyson, I gotta ask, how big is that mic? It's like bigger than your head.
It's really close to the camera, but I put my head right next to it. There we go. It's true.
Sorry, Valentine's Day plans. I usually do something before or after, just because I find it's a little frustrating to, deal with all the reservations and everything's packed. And yeah, I just feel like a herd of cattle moving through a restaurant. So usually we do something after, like the following weekend.
Very practical, Norm. It's Norm fashion. It's very practical.
Sounds like Norm celebrates Christmas in mid-January.
After Boxing Day, Boxing Week. Got a little discounts.
EJ, we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah. So for myself, I'm really not too sure. I'm not the best with all of the celebrations and whatnot, but we always find something to kind of do, just something away from the kids, preferably, and then we kind of go for a nice walk, go out for dinner, kind of thing. But yeah, something low key. But yeah. No plan to stuff yet. Hope she's not watching. She's not watching. Let's put it that way. Definitely, she's not watching.
And for myself, to be honest, I don't have anything planned out as of now. I think now with the new one at home, I think we'll probably be staying at home. Maybe I can go and get some roses and bring some chocolates back home.
So Tyson's got the most amount of brownie points right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a free gift card I won, so it's perfect.
Okay, gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about the topic always in the Vancouver news, always in BC news, housing affordability. The government's going after Airbnb. The federal government clamping down on I guess, student visas. So we'll touch a little bit about that as well. Let's start first with Airbnb. So I was talking to a couple of realtors recently who said they think you might see some deals downtown. We're talking about downtown, West End, Yaletown, so on, coming up in May. That's when the provincial government new rule against Airbnbs takes effect. And the key point in this new provincial legislation is that you have to rent for a minimum of 3 months. And if you're not renting for a minimum of 3 months, you're breaking the law. And so there's this speculation. The theory goes that a lot of owners are going to put their condos up for sale, and there's going to be a flood of new condos come onto the downtown market, and that might help mean some cheap deals out there. There's very few people I've talked to myself who are in this situation. And I know just from the past, I only knew about 10, 12 buildings in the downtown peninsula that actually allowed Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if they're all 100 units, that's 1,200 units. I took a look onto and found an article from Kenneth Chan in the Daily Hive, where Chan said, he referenced 2021 December, there were 2,300 Airbnb units, according to the city of Vancouver, in downtown Vancouver. So the reason I'm giving you this preamble is I'm skeptical that we're going to see this flood of listings hit the downtown market, and there's going to be all these great deals out there. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think about, what are your thoughts here on that? Are you hearing anything with regards to people wanting to sell their Airbnb units, or have maybe you've learned about something else?
I don't think it's going to bring a lot of units to the marketplace. These are all investors that we're talking about. They own the home. Sure, maybe they have a large or small mortgage on it, but people want to hold on to these assets that are very scarce. If there's not a lot of supply, why are people getting rid of their investment? You know, everybody wants a home, everybody wants an investment home. I don't see a lot of units coming to market. They're just going to rent it out month to month. And you know, the rents have really increased quite a bit. And unless people are going to be severely underwater renting it month to month, you know, I don't think people are going to sell. And even those people, they probably have, you know, unless they've only purchased in the last year or two and there's not a lot of equity. And, you know, I still see them selling, I still see them renting it out for the long term. I don't see a lot of people putting their home on the market. I don't think it's going to change much.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I don't see there could be a few that maybe come on the market over there, but as kind of Norm was saying, you know, a lot of people who kind of bought these properties and bought them for the sole purpose of turning into an Airbnb, or even had it a long time ago as a regular investment property that with a long-term tenant. You know, a lot of these investors, you know, have some money, or they bought at a time where the price point was really good, so they got some equity in it. So investors don't really like to take a loss, let's put it that way, unless they really have to. They're more than happy to kind of think outside the box and try to make the numbers work, as we kind of have seen this past year and a half, 2 years or so, where it has kind of slowed down a bit for real estate. We've also noticed how resilient this market is. So I feel like these investors know that real estate is still a good long-term play. So if they don't have to sell, they won't sell. There still will be some that have to, but I'd say the majority are going to do what it takes to kind of, you know, turn it into a regular investment property with a long-term tenant.
Yeah, I think this is definitely, it's probably a result of lobbying from the hotel industry with the government to really clamp down on this, because I don't think it's going to make a big impact on real estate for sales. I think they're hoping it would, but if I was looking at the data, I think Canada-wide, it would only free up about 10% more supply in the market from what they build year on year, and it's a one-time shot that it would be adding into the market. That's Canada-wide, and already known, and we talked about this before, but having Strata's already managed a lot of the Airbnbs and short-term rentals that can be in there, so I don't think it's going to make a huge impact. In fact, I think it's hurting the consumer even more, because hotels, I don't know if you've seen it, but since COVID, hotels are just a crazy price to book hotels, and they're going to get even more expensive because there's going to be less short-term housing on the market. And we've had a whole episode that we've talked about this before. But yeah, I don't think it's going to make a huge dent, like EJ was saying, and Norm. Investors are savvy; they're going to rent it out, you know, to longer-term tenants.
Yeah, you know, when you read through strata minutes, strata documents, the bylaws, it's very rare that any stratas these days even allow an Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
You might get 1 out of 50 buildings, and then it has to be your principal residence. And if it's your principal residence, that means you're living there, or you're living there for 6 months plus a day, at least the way I understand the language around what a principal resident is. And there's not a lot of buildings that allow it. So I don't know that, and if these numbers that they're right, 2,300, maybe there's more now, because that's 2 years ago. I would be surprised. I mean, how many of those, if a quarter of those sold, I mean, that would be, you know, a lot of units coming on the market. It'd be about 500 units or so coming, but well, we'll see, I guess. Any other thoughts on the anti-Airbnb legislation from the province?
Well, I wonder how it's going to affect places like Kelowna or like the Okanagan, because I know Kelowna is really clamping down hard on Airbnbs right now. But I know when my wife and I went there, it was hard to find places. But that's a resort area. That place thrives, and I know a lot of people who have Airbnbs up there. how is that going to affect them? So it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out and what it does for short-term accommodations.
Yeah, I think the big winner here's got to be the hotel industry, right? They're
Yeah,
opening the bottles of champagne in the back room saying, "Yeah." They just wiped out with one stroke of the pen.
Yeah.
The province just wiped out 17,000 short-term rentals. Most of them, I guess 80% of those are Airbnbs. And then there's the Verbos and the other little ones. 17,000 units gone. And if you're in the hotel industry, you got to be loving this. And there's less hotel units on the market now than when we held the Olympics here, if you can believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Okay. Okay. That's a little bit not the best news. Brighter news. Federal government caps the number of student visas that are available. It all seems to be about capping and limiting these days. And now in my reading, what I came across is that they capped the there were 900,000 student visas or visas of different types in 2023, up from the 800,000 in 2022. And I guess this is all categories of different types of student visas and so on. And the federal government wants to cap that because they think this is causing the increase in the housing unaffordability. Rents are going up because of this, more competition for rooms, for apartments, and so on. Our population is expected to grow from 5.5 million today to 7.9 million people by mid-century, which is a huge increase in the population. We're obviously not building enough homes to keep up with the demand. Thoughts? Do you see let me ask you this question. What percentage of your clientele do you find are new to Canada?
Great question. Not many on our part, but we're in Fraser Valley. It's a little bit different, but I haven't found many new to Canada buyers.
No.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's very, very few.
I'd say maybe 5% thereabouts.
But new to Canada, when I mean new to Canada, I mean they could be, immigrants. They have their permanent residency status, and they're pulling the trigger on something.
Yeah, I find everybody that I'm working with, they all wait till they get their permanent resident status. Nobody's paying the foreign buyer tax. I think very few. I was on the listing end when did it sell? I think it sold in December, and they actually paid the foreign buyer tax. But I was on the listing end. This is the buyer that we're talking about. So very rare. But again, that's what I was told. I don't know. I don't know what actually happened. I wasn't representing them.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I find, and maybe it's the way I phrased the question, but I find that like from newcomers to Canada, and once they have their PR status, I would say it's probably at least half of my client base are PRs. It's been a lot, especially a lot of people from India in the tech sector. I've had great experiences. So Tyson.
Yeah, one. Yeah, and I think that you find that more in your regions in the Fraser Valley. There's not a lot of that kind of work that we have. We're more families and that kind of stuff, and kind of the clientele that we're working with aren't typically foreign buyers or whatnot, or families from other countries that we're finding around here. But now, just to circle back on this, are we talking about student visas at this point? Yes. Because from what I understand, like when I was reading it too, like Christian, what you're saying is what the government's want to do and what they're proposing is capping international student visas of 364,000 across Canada, which is, they said, is a 35% reduction from the student, I think, but I think that's undergraduate level. So these are like the universities that you find in your strip malls, and all over, because apparently put together an undergrad degree is relatively simple in the educational world, where they can bring people in and they get a degree here in something, and they can get a student visa for that. And there was a lot of quote unquote institutions that were exploiting this. I think mainly in Toronto areas, from what I was hearing, where they're saying it's going to make a big impact. But this cap will not apply to the following. It doesn't apply to students at graduate level, so like master's or doctorate level studies, which is good because that makes sense because they're actually a profession that's actually doing something in our hospitals or schools. Study permits for elementary and secondary school levels. So for kids who are coming from abroad to study here, who are minors, it doesn't affect those visas. And then those looking to extend their current visa. So if you're in the country and you have a student visa, you can extend it without penalty on that. Yeah, what was quoted when they made this announcement a couple weeks ago was that some provinces will see a significant reduction in visas, whereas some, like some prairie provinces and other ones, may see an increase in visas granted to them because they're kind of balancing it out across the whole country in that way. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out, but I think it's a good move.
Okay, well said. Well said. You're on your numbers there, Tyson.
So anything I've written out, I'm done. That's it.
Gentlemen, pre-sales, a little bit of a quiet topic these days, but what do you think of pre-sales? Is pre-sales a good buy right now?
For pre-sales, I think it just really depends on the buyer, basically. So before the pricing, I'd say maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago or whatnot, it kind of made a lot of sense based on the values, right? You can put 20% down. You're like, oh, if I buy this place, based on the rent, it covers most of the mortgage or slightly under. But now the numbers don't make a lot of sense, especially for investors. So it really depends. I had a client who bought last year who bought a pre-sale, and their goal was, hey, we own a house, we're planning to downsize in 4 or 5 years. This is a great place for a great time to get a pre-sale, because 4 or 5 years down the line, when it's ready, they're able to sell their place. And at that time with the developer, there were some pretty good incentives. And back in the day when pricing was a lot better, those incentives kind of meant a lot, and they still kind of do. But yeah, it just really depends. I think it was in 2019, I had 9 investors buy into a pre-sale because I thought it was a good deal and based on what it could rent for, and it did really well. But looking fast forward to where we are now, it's very challenging to find a pre-sale that makes sense for a lot of investors. And pre-sales tend to actually cater to a lot of investors as well. So it just depends. If you got deep pockets and you just want to get into something, don't want to deal with the tenant for 3 or 4 years, there still could be some potential there for the future appreciation in 3 or 4 years. But yeah, I'm finding it less and less as an option for some investors, for sure.
Yeah, what kind of advice do you give to your buyers who are looking at pre-sales? What are 1 or 2 things they really have to keep in mind?
Only buy one if you can close on it. Like, I think there's a lot of people speculating, going, "Oh, the price is going to go up," and I'll assign the pre-sale to a buyer then, because the market will go up. And then what we found in this last year is a lot of people were actually having to walk away from their pre-sale because they could not close on it because interest rates were up higher, and they could not have the ability to close on it because they didn't make enough and they didn't have the intent to do that, which is highly risky. And so there's some volatility that comes with pre-sales, especially right now. Like, I know here in Langley, we just had a big project, 87 units that went in defaulted. And so that those townhouse owners, people who put their deposits on it, now have to wait for the court order, and it sounds like they're going to get their deposits back. But there's a lot of these kind of mid-tier or like new companies that are starting to kind of default because they can't have the carrying costs on the commercial side or the developer side. The carrying costs for them and the interest rates are much higher than what we pay as a homeowner for their loans and whatnot. And so I think there's a lot more volatility. So you just got to be way more cautious about it. And only if you can afford it to close on it, is it, would I recommend, okay, then this is something you could do. But otherwise, don't speculate, because speculators are getting burnt right now on it.
And going along with speculation, don't speculate on the future that you'll have a job with being paid that amount. Get a pre-construction rate hold. There's so many people who, they went to a presentation center without a realtor and they bought a place. They had no idea that they can get a pre-construction rate hold, for 3, 4, 5 years. And they're essentially speculating that they'll still have their job and still be making the same money, and the interest rates aren't going to be going up. So luckily
what
for
is
me,
a
I have
pre-construction
some.
rate hold? Can you just explain that to those who are listening, what that is?
So typically a larger development, say for a high rise, they'll have somebody from one of the big banks, RBC, TD, a mortgage broker sitting on site, and they will give people a pre-approval, but a pre-approval with a rate hold, but a rate hold that is guaranteed. It'll be an inflated amount. So back when interest rates were about 3%, this rate hold might be 4%. Well, now it might be, instead of 5.5, it might be 7%. But whatever it is, it's guaranteed for those 4 or 5 years. Well, fast forward 4 or 5 years when completion is, if rates are back down to 3%, you don't have to use that rate hold. You can, they'll rerun the numbers and you'll get the lower amount. If rates are way up, I have some clients right now who bought something in Squamish and the rates went way up. Luckily for them, they have a rate hold down at, I think it's 3.5%, something like that. So even if they were to assign, they're probably better off completing on it, selling the property, and doing a vendor take back mortgage. That might be a great idea as well. So a pre-construction rate hold is paramount. It's really one of the best ways you can protect yourself. And it's surprising how few buyers are actually doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think the bank that I saw that was offering that was RBC, where they had sort of, it's about a 3-year pre-construction rate hold, 3 or 3.5 years or so, wasn't it, Norm? And so you protect yourself, right? So you protect yourself so that if the rates do go up, you got that lower rate. You lose your job, you still have a mortgage. There's no further questions asked at that point. But like you said, like you're moving between jobs, you've been downsized, whatever the case may be. Now you got to get qualified 3 years later when the tower completes and you're getting qualified at 6%. Might be a little bit harder to get that mortgage. You guys don't ever see people walking away from pre-sales, do you? I mean, most of the time they will probably list and in cases where they have trouble getting a mortgage, I've seen them take high interest rate loans, maybe through not through an A-level bank, but through what we call the B lender, maybe even a private mortgage. And, when you call the realtor on the listing, he'll tell you like, yeah, my guy's really motivated. He really wants to sell it. I very rarely see people or hear about people walking away from pre-sales. I could be wrong on that. I just want to get your experience, just thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, nothing with our clients. We try not to set our clients up in those kind of situations, but I think it's more of a mortgage broker thing. A couple of my mortgage brokers that I know, they said they've had that happen to a couple of their clients, but it's not like this massive thing. But you do hear about it happening every now and then, but it's not on a mass scale that I've heard of.
I haven't heard of it. I think if people are close to it, they should run the numbers. I mean, do you assign it? Do you approach the developer and say, look, I'm not going to be able to complete, how much cash is it going to take for this to go away and you guys resell it to somebody else, right? I mean, not to say that couldn't be an option, because I mean, by the time you assign it, I mean, all the fees add up, you're probably even further in the hole. I think some people are just speculating that the market goes up, and it doesn't always. So I haven't run into it.
It seems like if you're buying a pre-sale, just with the hopes that the thing will go up in price, and you're not able to complete on it, it's kind of like jumping out of an airplane without packing your own parachute or checking.
You'll catch one midway down, right?
Yeah.
It's like taking your RSPs, going down to Vegas and putting it all on red and hoping for the best. I mean, it's speculating. It's very risky.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and to the viewers joining us, hopefully you got some value out of the program as well. Thanks for joining us, and happy Valentine's Day to you.